Albert Diamond Cohen was born in 1914 in Winnipeg, son of Alexander and Rose. They were a poor immigrant family who lived in Winnipeg's North End. His early days in business were very modest, but taught him some very important lessons.
He started with his father selling chocolate bars on the road out of a truck with his father at the age of 16. And that was really the beginnings of what became Agendas today. So, learning the art of the sale, going to, small general stores in towns in Western Canada that most of us have never heard of, and, trying to make a cold sale. So that really is where he learned how to sell things.
Albert started a small retail store with his 5 brothers and by 1939 had accumulated enough capital to start General Distributors. Albert and his brother Sam saw a real opportunity in Army surplus after World War II and started sand stores.
They bought, overruns of tents, flashlights, you name it, and sold it to the consumers who, still even 2 years after World War II, goods were scarce in Canada. I think it's very hard for people today to understand that, but it was such an impact, the Second World War, so it was very successful from the start.
In 1952, the company obtained exclusive Canadian rights for paper-made pens.
My dad got the Canadian rights for paper-made pens in the early 50s. At that time, it was mainly fountain pens that were in use, so the ballpoint pen was quite a revolutionary item at the time. So bringing that into Canada, was a huge thing, and people could actually sign checks and not worry about them being, I guess there was a big problem at the time where with the fountain pen you could quite easily forge a check. If the ink hadn't dried yet, you could make a copy of the signature and put it on another check, and that was a big problem in those days. So with the fast-drying ink of the ballpoint pen, it was revolutionary at the time.
Albert was a family man who, despite his busy schedule and frequent travel, kept family a top priority.
He always took the time in the morning to make breakfast for, my siblings and I on our way to school. He'd get up early, and I'd get up, brush my teeth, go to the kitchen, and there'd be a bowl of cereal and some fruit. And he just, I think he loved being a father. And at night too, when we were really young, he'd come in and sing us songs goodnight that my sister and I still remember, and my brother and I, we say, remember when Dad used to sing this? And that kind of thing still makes an impact. I think when you grow up in it, you don't know any differently. So I just assumed it was normal that your dad would go to Japan for 2 weeks on a business trip and then come back and then go to Montreal on a business trip for a few days, and he always brought back lots of presents for the kids, which was something nice. But no, as I got older, then I realized that, this is a little different. And when my dad started getting, some of the accolades and awards when I was a little bit older, I started realizing, hey, my dad, he's done pretty well, and I became more aware and more proud, actually. So.
While on his honeymoon in Japan, Cohen by chance saw an ad for an interesting product by a then new Japanese electronics company.
My father was traveling with my mom on their honeymoon, and he was importing items from Japan at the time, and he came across this article in a local Japanese paper talking about this small company that had perfected a transistorized radio. So being ever the entrepreneur, he decided to go and look, see what this company was about. So he arranged a meeting, and I think the next day met with this small company, was very impressed with what he saw, and subsequent to that signed the first agreement with what became the Sony Corporation. He was the first export customer for Sony. My dad would attempt to speak Japanese. They'd sort of show him phonetically how to say things, and he had some funny stories about how he would, when he was over in Japan, he'd start a speech and he'd be reading it phonetically, and some of his Japanese friends would say, "Very interesting, Mr. Cohen. What language was that in?" And he thought he was speaking to them in Japanese, but they couldn't understand what he was saying. So no, he did not speak Japanese. A cartoon that appeared in Maclean's magazine in 1965 showing my dad's friendship with Ian Fleming, who of course was the originator of James Bond. They struck up a friendship in the early 60s, and it lasted until Mr. Fleming's passing in 1964. He was very involved with the University of Manitoba, the establishment of the Idea Dinner. That was one of his babies. St. John's Ravenscourt in the 1970s. He, along with a few other prominent individuals in Winnipeg, basically helped save the school. If it wasn't for that, in the mid-70s, the school would have gone out of business. And I mean, you know, it's definitely an important school in this city, and continues to be to this day. You know, he was very supportive of the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, the Symphony, the Opera, Manitoba Theatre Centre. He was the president for a couple terms, helped get the theatre built where it stands today, you know, made donations to local hospitals, and, you know, helped people out. You know, I know in the past he got approached by people that maybe were down on their luck, and he'd help them out, and, you know, he wouldn't advertise it, and probably never got paid back, but he was very generous.
Albert Diamond Cohen passed away peacefully November 21st, 2011, at the age of 97, leaving a rich philanthropic, business, and family legacy behind.